The ambulance skidded through the emergency entrance just after midnight. Rain hammered the pavement. Inside, a woman lay pale and bleeding. Her designer suit soaked red. No doctor in sight. A man in a worn security jacket sprinted toward the gurney. "What happened?" he barked. "Car accident," the paramedic answered. She grabbed his wrist, her voice barely a whisper. "Wait, please. Just make it fast. I don't want the pain." He pulled off his jacket, draped it over her trembling shoulders. "You'll be okay. I promise." The fluorescent lights flickered. On his forearm, a faded military medic tattoo. Her eyes widened. Then everything went black. Most people who walked past Ethan Ward never looked twice. At 38, he was just another night security guard at St. Haven Hospital, moving through the hallways like a shadow after dark. He clocked in at 10 every evening and left at dawn, his boots squeaking softly on polished floors. To doctors and nurses rushing past, he was invisible, polite, forgettable, a fixture of the building, like the vending machines or the fire extinguishers mounted on walls. But Ethan Ward was not just a security guard. He was a father first. Every night, in the small staff cafeteria on the 3rd floor, his 8-year-old daughter Grace sat at a corner table doing homework. Her colored pencils scattered across notebooks. Her backpack hung on the chair beside her. A thermos of hot chocolate sat within reach. While he made his rounds checking doors and monitoring cameras, she drew pictures of superheroes and practiced multiplication tables. She never complained. She understood this was their life now. This was what they had to do. Ethan had been someone else once. A combat medic. Deployed 3 times to places most Americans only saw on the news. Afghanistan, Iraq. Places where the sand got into everything and the heat made you forget what winter felt like. He had pulled soldiers from burning vehicles, stitched wounds under fire, held dying men while they whispered prayers and called for their mothers. He had saved 37 lives in uniform, 37 men and women who went home to their families because his hands were fast and his mind stayed calm when everything around him exploded. The Army wanted to promote him. They offered a position stateside, a desk job with benefits and regular hours, a pension, a future that made sense. He turned it down. His wife Claire had died 2 years earlier in a highway collision. A drunk driver crossed the median at 70 miles per hour. A senseless tragedy that left him alone with a 6-year-old daughter who cried every night asking when mommy was coming home. Ethan could not be overseas anymore. He could not be unreachable. He could not miss another birthday or scraped knee or nightmare at 3 in the morning. So he left the military quietly, without ceremony, and found work that let him be present. Night security paid enough to cover rent and groceries. The hours were steady, and Grace could stay near him, safe and warm, doing her homework while he walked empty hallways. To the hospital staff, he was just another uniform. To his daughter, he was everything. At 2 in the morning, Grace would curl up on the vinyl cafeteria bench, her head resting on his folded jacket, and sleep until his shift ended at dawn. Then they would drive home through empty streets, make pancakes together at the kitchen table, and she would catch the school bus while he slept on the couch with the television playing low. It was not the life he had imagined when he was 20 and enlisted, but it was the life that mattered now. One night, checking the employee board near the ER entrance, he saw a framed newspaper clipping behind glass. A young woman in a sleek blazer shaking hands with the mayor. The caption read, "Olivia Hart, CEO of Hart Tech Industries, pledges $10 million to City Healthcare." Ethan glanced at it and kept walking. He did not care about powerful people or their charitable donations. He cared about Grace's spelling test on Friday. About whether the vending machine on the 4th floor still ate quarters without dispensing anything. That was his world now. Small. Quiet. Manageable. Enough. The call came over the radio just after 11. Incoming trauma. Downtown Bridge. ETA. 4 minutes. Ethan was near the ER entrance, checking the automatic doors to make sure they were functioning properly. He heard urgency in the dispatcher's voice and stepped outside into the rain. It poured in heavy sheets, drumming on the ambulance bay roof and forming rivers along the gutters. The ambulance screamed into the bay, lights strobing red and blue against wet concrete. 2 paramedics yanked the gurney out fast, wheels rattling on the ramp. The woman on it was young, early 30s, her face ghostly pale under the harsh lights. Blood streaked her neck and soaked through her white blouse. Her eyes were half closed, fluttering. Ethan recognized her immediately. Olivia Hart, the CEO from the newspaper clipping, the woman who pledged millions to healthcare but probably never set foot in a place like this after dark. A nurse sprinted out from the ER entrance, her scrubs soaked within seconds. "Where's Dr. Reyes?" she shouted over the rain. "Stuck in traffic. Multi-car accident on the expressway. Could be 20 minutes. The nurse's face went white. 20 minutes was too long. Way too long. Ethan stepped forward without thinking. "I know what I'm doing." The nurse stared at him, clearly confused. He was just security. Just a guy who walked the halls at night making sure doors were locked. But something in his voice, something in the way he moved, made her step aside. He moved to the gurney and placed 2 fingers on Olivia's wrist. Her pulse was erratic, weak, thready. She was slipping into shock fast. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" His voice was steady and low, the voice he used to use in field hospitals when wounded soldiers came in panicking. Her eyelids fluttered. She looked up at him, her lips trembling, trying to form words. "Please," she whispered, barely audible over the rain. "Just make it fast. I don't want the pain." Ethan pulled off his jacket and tucked it around her shoulders, trying to keep her warm, trying to keep her body from shutting down. "Not tonight," he said firmly. "You're going to see the sunrise. I promise you that." He pressed his palm against the wound on her side, applying firm, even pressure to slow the bleeding. She gasped, her body jerking. "Stay with me," he ordered, his voice taking on that command tone that soldiers always responded to. "Breathe in. Count to 4. Breathe out. Do it again." She obeyed, her eyes locked on his, using his face as an anchor to reality. He did not look away, did not blink. "You're safe now," he said. "I've got you." And for the first time since the crash, since her car had spun out on the wet bridge and slammed into the guardrail, she believed it. The rain continued falling, but inside that moment there was only his voice, calm and certain, pulling her back from the edge of death one breath at a time. Ethan's hands moved with a precision that belonged to another life, another version of himself. He checked her airways first, tilting her head back slightly to make sure nothing was obstructed. Then he stabilized her neck with one hand while the other maintained pressure on the wound. His voice never wavered, never showed doubt or fear. "Breathe in. Good. You're doing great. Breathe out. That's it. Stay with me." The nurse stood nearby holding supplies, ready to assist. But she could see he did not really need help. He knew exactly what he was doing. Every movement was deliberate, practiced. The muscle memory of a man who had done this dozens of times before, under much worse conditions. Olivia's vision blurred at the edges, darkness creeping in, but she could still see him. The man in the security uniform that looked 2 sizes too big. His face was calm, his eyes sharp and focused. He smelled like rain and old coffee and something antiseptic. "What's your name?" she whispered, needing to know, needing to attach identity to the hands that were keeping her alive. "Ethan, Ethan," she repeated, as if memorizing it, as if she might need to remember it later for something important. "Am I going to die?" "No." He said it like a fact. Not a hope or a wish. A command. A refusal to accept any other outcome. She wanted to believe him. And somehow, against all logic, she did. When Dr. Reyes finally arrived 15 minutes later, rushing through the doors with his coat half on and his hair wet from rain, Ethan stepped back without a word. The doctor assessed the situation quickly, with experienced eyes. Glanced at Ethan, then at the nurse, then back at the woman on the gurney, who was still conscious and breathing steadily. "Who stabilized her?" "He did," the nurse said, nodding toward Ethan, who was already moving toward the exit. Dr. Reyes looked at him with sudden respect, the kind doctors rarely showed to hospital security guards. "You just saved her life," Where did you learn that? Ethan did not respond. He picked up his jacket from where it had fallen beside the gurney, now stained with her blood across the collar and sleeves. He walked back toward the entrance, his boots leaving wet prints on the floor. Behind him, Olivia was being wheeled inside, disappearing through swinging doors under harsh fluorescent lights, voices echoing orders for blood type and IV fluids and surgery prep. But he kept walking. In the cafeteria, Grace was asleep on the bench, her head pillowed on her backpack. Her crayon drawing lay half-finished on the table beside her math homework. A man in a uniform holding a little girl's hand. Underneath in wobbly letters, she had written, "My hero." Ethan sat down beside her and brushed hair from her forehead with gentle fingers. His hands still smelled like antiseptic and blood. He exhaled slowly, feeling the adrenaline drain away, leaving behind only exhaustion. He did not feel like a hero. He felt tired, in a way sleep could not fix. But he had kept his promise to that woman. She would see the sunrise. That was enough. Olivia woke in a private room, flooded with morning light, streaming through large windows. Her body ached everywhere. Ribs, side, head, shoulders. But she was breathing. She was alive. The ceiling tiles above her were white and clean. A nurse was adjusting her IV line, humming softly to herself, some melody Olivia did not recognize. Everything felt distant, muffled, like she was underwater or wrapped in thick cotton. Who saved me? Olivia's voice came out hoarse and cracked, her throat dry. The nurse looked down at her and smiled warmly. A security guard. Ethan Ward. He stabilized you until the doctor arrived. Kept you from going into shock. You're very lucky he was there. Olivia blinked slowly, trying to process that information through the fog of painkillers. A security guard? The nurse nodded while checking the monitors beside the bed. Used to be a combat medic. Army, 3 deployments. But he doesn't talk about it much. Keeps to himself mostly. A security guard, not a surgeon, not a trauma specialist. Not someone she would ever notice walking through a hospital hallway. Not someone whose name she would ever think to learn or remember. The door opened, and Marcus appeared. Her assistant. His tablet already glowing in his hands, like an extension of his body. "Thank God you're awake," he said. Genuine relief flooding his face. Then immediately, seamlessly, "The press is asking questions. They want to know who saved you. This is actually a great story. Really humanizing. We should definitely use it for the foundation." Olivia's jaw tightened, pain shooting through her temples. "No." Marcus frowned, confused. "No? Don't mention his name, but this is perfect. A veteran working as a security guard saves the CEO. It's..." "I said no, Marcus." Her voice was sharp now, cutting through his pitch. He stared at her, clearly trying to calculate why she would refuse such obviously good publicity. But he did not understand, could not understand. Olivia Hart had built her empire on control, on projecting strength, on being untouchable. And the idea that she had been helpless, that she had been broken and bleeding and begging a stranger to make it fast, to end her pain, that was not the narrative she wanted, not the story the world needed to see about her. So she buried it. She thanked Dr. Reyes publicly, in a carefully worded statement. Praised the hospital staff, in generic terms. Announced a new donation for emergency services that would generate positive headlines. But she never mentioned Ethan Ward. Never spoke his name to a single reporter or journalist. When people asked who had stabilized her before the doctor arrived, she said simply and vaguely, "The hospital staff were incredible. I owe them everything." Safe. Controlled. Erased. 3 days later, when she was discharged, she left St. Haven Hospital through a side entrance to avoid cameras. Marcus held an umbrella over her head, though it was not raining. A black limousine waited at the curb, engine running. As she slid into the leather seat, she glanced back at the building one last time. Somewhere inside those walls, a man in a security uniform was probably starting his shift, walking the same halls he walked every night. A man who had saved her life and asked for nothing in return. A man whose name she had deliberately kept from the world. Shame flickered through her chest, but she pushed it down, locked it away. She was Olivia Hart. She did not owe explanations to anyone. It was late afternoon when Olivia returned to the hospital for her follow-up appointment 2 weeks later. She moved through the lobby slowly, carefully, ribs still aching with every deep breath. Her personal assistant had offered to reschedule, to have a doctor come to her penthouse instead, but she had insisted on coming here. She needed to see the place again, needed to walk through those doors on her own feet. And then she saw him. Ethan Ward, standing near the vending machines talking to a little girl with pigtails who could not have been more than 8 years old. The girl laughed at something he said, her whole face lighting up. And he smiled down at her with a soft, tired smile that made him look younger than he probably was. Olivia stopped walking. For a moment she considered turning around, taking the elevator, avoiding this entirely. But something pulled her forward. Some weight in her chest that needed resolution. Ethan? He turned at the sound of his name. Recognized her immediately, though his expression remained neutral. Miss Hart. She swallowed, suddenly nervous in a way she had not been nervous in years. I wanted to thank you for what you did that night. He nodded once, simple and brief. You're welcome. Silence stretched between them, awkward and heavy. She shifted her weight, suddenly aware of how ridiculous she must look, standing here in her tailored Armani coat and Louboutin heels talking to a man in a faded security uniform that had clearly seen better days. The contrast felt obscene. I also wanted to ask you. She hesitated, then pushed forward. To keep it quiet. What happened that night? If anyone asks, his expression did not change at all. I wasn't planning to tell anyone, Miss Hart. Good. That's good. She tried to smile, but it felt wrong on her face. I don't want people to think that you needed help? The words hung in the air between them. She flinched as if he had struck her. He looked at her directly now, his voice low and even. No judgment, but no warmth either. You don't owe me anything, Miss Hart. Not gratitude, not money, not recognition. Nothing. Just live better than you did before. That's all I ask. The words hit her like a physical slap. Not cruel, not meant to wound, just honest in a way that cut deeper than any insult could have. She opened her mouth to respond, to explain, to justify herself. But nothing came out. No words formed. He turned back to his daughter, who was tugging insistently on his sleeve, oblivious to the tension. Dad, can we get chips from the machine? One bag, he said, his voice gentle now, a different person entirely. And you're sharing with me. Olivia stood frozen as they walked away down the hallway. The little girl chattering happily about something that happened at school. She had been dismissed. Not with anger or resentment. With indifference. And somehow that hurt more than anything else could have. The little girl glanced back over her shoulder and waved at Olivia with innocent friendliness. Olivia lifted her hand automatically. A small wave in return. Feeling foolish. Then they disappeared around the corner, and she was alone in the hallway with the vending machines humming. A doctor walked past without looking at her. 2 nurses chatted near the elevator about weekend plans. Life continued as if nothing had happened. As if she had not just been told, quietly and firmly, that her wealth and power and carefully constructed public image meant absolutely nothing to the man who saved her life. She made her way to the appointment, answered the doctor's questions mechanically, scheduled another follow-up for next month. And the entire time, his words echoed in her mind on an endless loop. Just live better than you did before. That evening, Grace burst into the hospital cafeteria waving a bright yellow flyer above her head like a flag. Dad, look. Heart Tech is donating computers to my school. Ethan glanced up from his coffee, which had gone cold an hour ago. That's great, kiddo. 20 new computers for the library. And tablets for every classroom. Grace was practically bouncing with excitement as she spread the flyer on the table between them. Miss Hart is really nice, huh? Doing stuff like this for kids? Ethan looked out the window without answering immediately. A black limousine was pulling away from the front entrance far below, moving slowly through the evening traffic. Through the tinted glass, he could just make out a silhouette. Olivia Hart, sitting in the back seat, staring up toward the hospital building as if looking for something or someone. For a brief moment, their eyes seemed to meet across the distance, across the glass and steel and space between their worlds. Then the car turned the corner and disappeared into the city. Grace climbed onto the bench beside him, swinging her legs and humming to herself. "Dad? Yeah? Do you think she's a good person? Miss Hart?" Ethan thought about it carefully, about the way Olivia had looked at him earlier that afternoon, the shame that flickered in her eyes when she asked him to stay silent, the relief on her face when he agreed without argument, the weight she seemed to carry on her shoulders like armor she could not take off. "I think," he said slowly, choosing his words, "she's trying to be. And that's what matters." Grace nodded, satisfied with that answer, in the way children are when they trust their parents completely. She returned to coloring a picture of their apartment building with the sun shining overhead. Ethan watched the empty street where the limousine had been. The rain had stopped hours ago, but the pavement was still wet, reflecting streetlights in long golden streaks like veins of light running through darkness. He did not expect to see Olivia Hart again after today, and honestly, he was fine with that. Their worlds did not overlap in any meaningful way. She lived in penthouses and boardrooms and made decisions that affected thousands of people. He lived in a 2-bedroom apartment where the heat sometimes did not work, and the neighbors upstairs fought every weekend. She worried about stock prices and board meetings. He worried about making sure his daughter had clean socks for school. But something told him this was not over. Something in the way she had looked at him, in the careful way she had asked him to erase himself from her story. The woman in that limousine was drowning in her own success and did not know how to ask for help. Maybe she would find a way, maybe she would not. Either way, it was not his problem to solve. He had Grace. He had his work. He had enough. A month later, Ethan was assigned to work security at the annual Hart Foundation Gala, filling in for another guard who had called in sick. It was held in a glittering ballroom downtown, the kind of place Ethan had only seen in movies. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen fireworks, throwing prismatic light across marble floors. String quartets played classical music in corners, while waiters in white gloves circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres that probably cost more per bite than his hourly wage. Women in designer gowns that cost more than his yearly salary glided past him without a glance, their jewelry catching the light. Men in custom tuxedos discussed stock portfolios and vacation homes in the Hamptons. Ethan stood near the back wall, arms crossed, scanning the crowd with practiced efficiency. He was invisible again, just part of the scenery. Another uniform, another service worker these people would never notice or remember. Then the lights dimmed slowly. A spotlight hit the stage at the far end of the ballroom, and Olivia Hart stepped into that circle of light wearing a midnight blue gown that seemed to shimmer. Her hair swept back elegantly, her posture absolutely perfect. She looked untouchable, radiant, like royalty, like she had never been broken or bled or begged for anything in her entire life. She began her speech about innovation and community investment and building a better future for Chicago's children. Her voice was confident, practiced, hitting all the right emotional notes. The crowd applauded at all the right moments, their champagne glasses catching the light. Ethan watched from the back, detached and professional. And then the fire alarm went off. The sound was deafening, echoing off the high ceilings. Chaos erupted instantly. People screamed, shoving toward the exits in a surge of panic and expensive fabric. Champagne glasses shattered on marble. Someone knocked over a table. Smoke began pouring from the kitchen area, thick and dark. Ethan moved immediately, his training kicking in automatically. Single file, stay low, move quickly but don't run. He positioned himself near the main exit, directing the crowd, keeping them from trampling each other in their desperation to escape. His voice cut through the panic, calm and authoritative. And then he saw him. An elderly man, 70 at least, clutching his chest near the bar. His face had gone gray. He collapsed hard, knees buckling, hitting the floor. People stepped around him, too panicked to stop, too frightened to help. They just kept moving toward the exits like a river flowing around a stone. Ethan shoved through the crowd without hesitation and dropped to his knees beside the man. checked for a pulse at the carotid artery. Faint, irregular, barely there. He tilted the man's head back to clear the airway and started chest compressions immediately. 30 beats, hard and fast, the way he had been trained. 2 rescue breaths, then again, and again. The ballroom was emptying fast around him, people fleeing, but Ethan did not stop, did not look up. His hands moved on autopilot, his mind focused entirely on the rhythm, on keeping this stranger's heart beating, on refusing to let another person die. On the stage, Olivia stood frozen. The smoke was thickening, but she could not move, could not look away. She watched Ethan work, watched his face completely focused and calm despite the chaos, watched his hands moving with absolute precision and unwavering commitment. She watched as the old man suddenly coughed violently, gasped for air, and opened his eyes. The small crowd that remained erupted in spontaneous applause. Ethan helped the man sit up carefully, spoke to him quietly and reassuringly, until paramedics arrived and took over. When Ethan finally stood, his shirt was damp with sweat, his tie loosened and askew, his hair disheveled. He looked up toward the stage through the thinning smoke, and found Olivia staring directly at him, her expression unreadable, but her eyes wide with something like recognition, something like understanding. For the first time she truly saw him, not as a security guard, not as a random stranger who happened to know first aid, but as a man who saved lives while everyone else ran away, as someone who stepped forward when others stepped back, as a person who mattered in ways she had never bothered to notice before. The next morning, Olivia sat alone in her corner office on the 40th floor, staring at a personnel file spread across her mahogany desk. Ethan Ward. Date of birth: March 14, 1987. Military service, United States Army. Combat medic, 2006 to 2022. 16 years of service. Decoration Silver Cross for Valor Under Fire. Army Commendation Medal. Purple Heart for wounds received in combat. Reason for discharge: family hardship following death of spouse. She scrolled through the scanned documents on her computer screen with trembling hands. There was a photograph of him in full dress uniform, standing at attention, holding a little girl in his arms who could not have been more than 6 years old. The girl was smiling brightly at the camera. He was not smiling at all. His face was serious, almost grim, the face of someone carrying unbearable weight. Medical records showed 3 combat deployments, commendations from commanding officers praising his skill under pressure, his steady hands, his refusal to give up on wounded soldiers even when situations seemed hopeless. A career of distinguished service, of lives saved, of heroism performed quietly without fanfare. Cut short. Why? She read further, clicking through pages. Spouse Claire Marie Ward, deceased. Cause of death: motor vehicle accident. Blunt force trauma. Date of death: 2 years prior. Survived by daughter Grace Elizabeth Ward, age 6 at time of incident. And suddenly, everything made sense with painful clarity. He had not failed. He had not run away from duty. He had not chosen comfort over service. He had sacrificed everything, his entire career and future and identity, to raise his daughter alone, to be present for her when she needed him most, to give her stability in a world that had taken her mother away. Olivia's hands trembled as she closed the file. She had dismissed this man, erased him from her story, asked him to stay silent and invisible. And all the while he had been a decorated soldier who saved lives on battlefields. A hero who gave up his entire future to be a good father. A man who possessed more integrity in his little finger than she had in her entire body. She sat back in her leather chair and stared out the window at the Chicago skyline, at the city she had conquered through ambition and ruthlessness and careful calculation, and she felt ashamed in a way she had not felt since childhood. That afternoon she made a decision that terrified her. She called a press conference. No warning to her publicity team. No carefully crafted script. No focus groups or polling. Her publicist tried desperately to stop her. Marcus begged her to reconsider, to think about the optics, to let him manage the narrative. She ignored them all and walked to the podium. The cameras went live. Olivia Hart stood before dozens of reporters, her face calm, but her voice shaking slightly as she began to speak without notes. A month ago, I was in a car accident. I nearly died on that ambulance gurney. The room went completely silent. The person who saved my life was not a doctor. He was not a surgeon or an emergency medical technician. He was a night security guard named Ethan Ward. A single father. A decorated combat veteran. A man I never thanked publicly because I was ashamed. Reporters leaned forward, cameras flashing rapidly. I was ashamed that I needed help. That I was weak and broken. That the person who saved me was someone I would have walked past in a hospital hallway without a second glance. Someone whose name I did not think was worth remembering or acknowledging. Her voice broke slightly, but she pushed forward. At the Heart Foundation gala last night, I watched Ethan Ward save another life. An elderly man having a heart attack. And while everyone else in that ballroom, myself included, ran toward the exits in panic, Ethan ran toward the danger. Just like he did for me. Just like he did in 3 combat deployments serving this country with honor. She paused, looked directly into the cameras. Ethan Ward did not ask for recognition. He did not ask for money or fame or anything at all. But I owe him more than my life. I owe him the truth. And the truth is that he reminded me what it means to be human. Ethan was sitting in the hospital cafeteria with Grace when the broadcast played on the television, mounted above the vending machines. Grace's eyes went wide as saucers. "Dad! That's you! She's talking about you!" Ethan watched the screen without any visible expression, his coffee cup halfway to his lips. On the television, Olivia was wiping her eyes with careful fingers, her voice breaking as she finished her public statement. The crawl at the bottom of the screen read, "Heart Tech CEO reveals identity of life-saving hero." Grace grabbed his arm with both hands, shaking it excitedly. "Dad!" She said sorry. She said thank you. For real this time. Ethan nodded slowly, setting down his coffee. He felt nothing dramatic. No anger or resentment. No satisfaction or vindication. Just a quiet acceptance that this woman was trying, in her own messy and very public way, to become a better person. And that was enough. The next day, Olivia came to the hospital again, not with cameras this time, not with assistants or publicists or security details, just her. Alone. Wearing jeans and a simple sweater that made her look more human and less like a magazine cover. She found him in the employee parking lot at the end of his night shift, leaning against his old pickup truck that had 200,000 miles on it and a dent in the passenger door. The sun was just beginning to rise over the city, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold and orange. "I wanted to apologize," she said quietly, stopping a few feet away. "Not for the cameras or the press, for me. Personally." Ethan looked at her. Really looked, for the first time since the night he saved her life. She seemed smaller somehow, without the armor of designer clothes and perfect makeup. More human. More real. "You don't need to apologize to me," he said. "You just need to mean what you said up there." She smiled, small and sad and genuine. "I'm trying. I really am trying." They stood together in the morning light. 2 people who had saved each other in completely different ways. One with skilled hands and steady nerves. One with public confession and painful honesty. "I want to offer you something," she said after a moment. "A position with the Heart Foundation. Safety and medical advisor. You would help us build programs for veterans, for families in crisis. You would have real influence, real resources to help people who need it." Ethan was quiet for a long moment, considering. "Why me?" "Because you see people I don't see," she said simply. "You help people I forget exist. You care about things I've ignored my entire life, and I need someone to remind me what actually matters in this world." He thought about Grace, about her future and the opportunities he could never give her on a security guard's salary. About the good he could do with real resources behind him. "I'll do it," he said finally. "But not for me. For Grace. To build something better for her and kids like her." Olivia nodded, understanding completely. "That's exactly why I'm asking." She extended her hand. He shook it firmly, and in that simple gesture something fundamental shifted between them. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. A bridge built slowly and carefully from wreckage and mistakes and painful growth. "There's one condition," Ethan said. "What's that?" "No publicity stunts. No press conferences about me. I do the work quietly. You handle the money and the bureaucracy. We help people without making it about us." Olivia smiled, a real smile this time, reaching her eyes. "Deal." "Absolutely." As she walked back to her car, Grace came running across the parking lot, backpack bouncing against her shoulders. "Dad, was that Miss Hart?" "Yeah, kiddo. Is she nice?" Ethan watched the car pull away into morning traffic. "Yeah, I think she's learning to be." 1 year later, the ribbon was cut on the Ward Center for Community Healing, standing proud on the south side of Chicago. It was a clean, modern building with wide windows that let in natural light and soft paint colors chosen specifically to feel welcoming rather than institutional. Inside, veterans could access free health care and mental health counseling. Families in crisis could get emergency support and job training. Children like Grace could do homework in a safe, warm space after school, while their parents worked or attended support groups, or simply caught their breath after years of struggling alone. The waiting room smelled like fresh coffee and new paint. On the walls hung photographs of the people the center had helped over the past year. Real faces with real names, real stories of survival and recovery, and second chances. No corporate branding, no slick marketing campaigns, just human beings reclaiming their lives one difficult day at a time. Olivia stood at the small podium on the center's front steps, dressed simply in a gray blazer and black slacks. No designer gown this time, no jewelry except a simple watch. The crowd gathered on the sidewalk was smaller than at her usual events. No press corps, no society photographers. Just people who mattered. Volunteers who gave their time. Veterans who had been helped. Families whose lives had been changed. Community members who had donated money or supplies or simply showed up when needed. "A year ago, a man I barely knew saved my life," she said, her voice carrying in the morning air. "And then he taught me something much harder. He taught me that healing is not just for the wounded. It is for anyone who still cares enough to try. Anyone brave enough to admit they need help and wise enough to accept it when it's offered." She looked at Ethan, who stood off to the side with his arm around Grace's shoulders. The girl had grown taller this year, her hair longer, her smile more confident. "This center bears his name, but it exists because of all of us. Because we decided together that people matter more than profit. That service matters more than recognition. That doing the right thing is its own reward and needs no applause." When the applause faded anyway, Ethan was invited to speak. He stepped up to the podium, clearly uncomfortable being the center of attention, but steady in his purpose. "Healing is not just for the wounded," he repeated, his voice quiet but firm. "It is for everyone who still cares. Everyone who refuses to give up on each other." He paused, looked out at the crowd of faces. Some familiar now, some still strangers. A lot of people here tonight know what it's like to be invisible, to be walked past without acknowledgement. To have your story dismissed because it doesn't fit someone's comfortable narrative about how the world works. His voice was still quiet, but it carried weight. "This place is for all of us who got tired of being invisible. Who decided we mattered even if the world kept forgetting. Who chose to help each other because no one else was going to do it for us." Grace ran up and handed him a drawing she had made, carefully colored and folded. A man giving his jacket to a woman lying on a gurney. Above them, a bright red heart glowed like a star. The audience laughed softly, warmly. The sound of people who understood love in its simplest form. After the ceremony ended, Olivia approached Ethan, holding a small wooden plaque she had commissioned. Engraved on it in simple letters were the words she had spoken that night in the rain. "Please don't make it fast. Stay." She handed it to him carefully. "You told me I would see the sunrise," she said softly, her eyes bright. "I've seen it 1,000 times since then. Every single morning feels like a gift I almost threw away in my arrogance." Ethan looked at the plaque, ran his thumb over the engraved letters, felt the weight of what it represented. "Good," he said simply. "That's good." Sunlight poured through the center's windows, illuminating the lobby where people were already gathering for the evening support groups. Grace tugged on his sleeve impatiently. "Dad, you promised. Can we get ice cream now?" "Yeah," he said, smiling down at her. "We absolutely can." Olivia walked with them toward the parking lot. Outside, the city moved on in its endless rhythm. Cars honked. People rushed past on sidewalks. Trains rumbled on elevated tracks. Life continued in all its messy, chaotic beauty. But in that moment, walking together in warm sunlight, they had everything they truly needed. A second chance earned through honesty. A new beginning built on foundation of mutual respect. And the quiet, steady truth that sometimes the people who save us are the ones we almost never see. The ones we walk past without thinking. The ones whose names we forget to ask. The ones who do what's right simply because it needs doing. Ethan held the door of his truck open for Grace, then glanced back at Olivia standing in the sunlight. "You coming to the ice cream place?" She smiled. A real smile. Free from performance and pretense. "Yeah, I am." And together, all three of them drove off into the brightness of a new day.